time is now to step into changing the industry worldwide. So welcome to the J3U Coaching Podcast. You guys want the pro card, but you have the execution level of a novice competitor. Today on the J3U Coaching Podcast, we're going to be talking about having those pro card expectations, but only executing to the level of these novice classes. And we have two of the J3U coaches with us today, and Alex and Darren. And I'm super excited to dive in, and I think it's appropriate that you two are joining the podcast today for this conversation, with Darren, you being an Olympian, Alex, you coaching at a really high level with pro caliber athletes, winning NPC nationals a few years back, and kind of both of you guys knowing what that standard is. And I guess I would just kind of open the floor to any initial opening comments of what do you guys see onboarding that kind of gives you the red flags that this might be coming as coaches when you kind of start to pick up athletes?
You want to take it away?
You want me to go? So initial sort of red flags, I think, because the sort of pro cards, I'm going to say it seems more accessible rather than is more accessible, because I think it's seen more now with social media. There is more shows around, but I don't think that makes it any easier to get. But people are seeing more and more people getting it, and they're thinking, oh, I'm just going to start going to the gym and 2 years later get a pro card. For me, the big red flag is people talking about pro card, they haven't even competed or gone through a prep. That's their goal. I'm like, it's a lot harder than social media makes it look.
Yeah. I know a lot of times too, you'll see people promote that getting a pro card here in the States is a lot easier than getting it in Europe or some of these international shows, which I don't think is fully the case. I think a lot of that comes down to how many people actually show up. Darren, you were making this point earlier, you look at NPC nationals, they get 2 cards per class. Some of those classes have more competitors than the entire show has in some of the international.
I think if you're to look at across 12 months, I reckon the amount of pro cards given out per class is pretty similar in Europe. But there's less opportunity in terms of shows in the States, but those shows give more. I'm saying this from a very unbiased place. So looking at it, I would say the American shows, the standard to me looks higher across most of it.
Yeah, and a lot of it's just the pool that you're pulling from, right? But either way, I think the point here that we kind of need to dive into is the daily habits that it looks like to execute it like a pro. And I think this is not something that's talked about. I think a lot of coaches assume that people just do this automatically, or maybe they don't even assume that, or they don't even realize the impact that these little daily habits have in regards to keeping someone on track. And I think a great place to start with this is sleep habits. Alex, I'm going to kick this to you, because with the clientele that you coach, you coach a fair bit of the younger crowd, you coach some of those more experienced bodybuilders. So you've got a little bit of an array of all the different types. And I know from a coaching side, the sleep is so impactful. I joke with Alex, I wear a Whoop band, and I share my Whoop band status with Alex every once in a while, because my sleep habits up until the last couple of weeks have not been great, making sure that all the businesses run smooth. And it's you laugh about it, but in reality, if bodybuilding was my biggest priority, or I had this big athletic endeavor that was my biggest priority, sleep is one of the biggest recovery capacity tools that we have that just gets so overlooked. So kind of diving into the coaching side, Alex, what are some of the red flags you start seeing if this starts to get skewed, and how are you addressing this with clients to make them realize how important this is?
Yeah, so a lot of what's very common is just the inconsistency on what time they go to bed, and a lot of it is it's not even the majority of the ones who lack that consistency are the ones who don't have the schedule. So a lot of the ones who even work nights, or they work from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., their sleep schedule is actually better than some of my people who aren't in a rhythm or routine with a job. And so that's what I see a lot of is they'll just sporadically go to bed, they'll sporadically sleep late, and then they'll sporadically wake up early, and there's just no consistency. And each week they're checking in I'm a little fatigued, I'm tired, and that, or I'm having trouble going to bed. And so a lot of what I look at first is just like, hey, what are you doing before you go to sleep? Like most of the people were on their phones. We're, um, watching TV. We're all in all these different forms of like being stimulated before bed. So what I'm big on first is just like, hey, let's, if you are a TV watcher, just get some blue light glasses. Try to put your phone down, the last 45 minutes before bed. Be in a cold, dark room, just little things that they might not think about. I actually am big on like meditation, and I try not to like pitch them on meditation because they start thinking I'm like, like some weirdo, but I'm just like, hey, why don't you like close your eyes and just start picturing things that make you happy for 3 minutes,
Yeah.
and that goes a long way. And some of my people who can like they can understand that, I'll even open up to some things that like, hey, you've got this stressing you out this week. Well, look, this is what I've got going on. This is what I use to help, and just giving them some, hey, this is normal, really helps them a lot understand it and get back on track.
The meditation piece is like sounds so crunchy granola.
Yeah.
Like you're about to pull out some avocado toast and go sit on a California beach, but it's so important. Like I found the power of meditation in one of my first few contest preps, not pre-bed, but during cardio sessions. Like literally just I would almost Pavlov dog myself. I'd play the same playlist of songs every single cardio session, and it would get me into this flow. And I would just close my eyes and picture myself like on stage or doing my posing routine or in comparisons or whatever. And it's like it's such a powerful thing to be able to visualize yourself doing these things, or even just like different types of meditation as well. Like you guys could use any one of the apps that are out there. And there's like the mindfulness app or a couple others, but it's like so underrated, and I think it can integrate well into a sleep routine. I think some of the things like from a habits perspective that get lost is we can do things like hot shower about 45 minutes prior to bed to kind of cool that core body temperature. Setting alarms, I think, is a massive one for like when to start the bed routine. So not just like go to bed, but like when to turn off the TV, because Netflix does a great job from a branding perspective of like keeping you in it. Like they have that little next episode button, right? Like what is the biggest thing Netflix is fighting? It's time, right? And if they can take more of your time, they're going to keep you on the platform longer. So having that alarm, like, hey, it's time to start your bedtime routine, having a bedtime routine, and then having those consistent wake times is huge. But I think one of the big things too is like the PD input, right? We know that like the PD input can be pretty detrimental to this, just like can drive sympathetic activity with the total amount of PD usage, that total androgen load. If estradiol is skewed relative to androgens, estradiol is going to drive wakefulness. And so like if we have that high estradiol environment that's too high, could potentially be driving detriment to the sleep. So there is a supplementation side of the equation as well that I think you could consider. There's a lot of great products. I like the supplement needs one. It's just kind of a staple that I'll use alongside some like high melatonin usage. Um, but I think that the sleep routine also kind of comes with consistency in the meals. And then Darren, I'm going to have you like talk about this because we've all been there where we screwed the day up, and it's supposed to be in bed at 10 and it's 9:45 and you have like two meals left, or something happened during the day where you're way behind on your food. And I think that day consistency, like what your day looks like, is pretty massive too. What do you think, Darren?
Yeah, for me, like I think we're hitting the nail on the head there when you talk about routine, and something that I think always think of. I think you talked about it with training before, like the that song that sets the trigger for a set. I have my
Mm-hmm.
routine that sets the trigger for relax. So like,
Yeah.
listen, I'm overly like a robot. My day looks the exact same every day. I meal same time, train same time, wake same time, bed same time. But the way my evening looks is we have an agreement, both me and my wife. Like we online coach. We're on doing stuff all day. Once it gets to between 7 and 7:30, our phones get turned over and put away. At that point, then we will shower if we need to shower, but always by 8 o'clock, we're set there and we watch a series like a 45 to an hour long episode on Netflix to kind of just switch our brains off from work. And for me, that sets the tone to bring it all down. So I don't think it matters.
Mhm.
Like everyone's going to have a different routine, but I think it's having that consistent routine that sets that trigger in your brain that it's like, and sure enough, by between 9 and 9:30, I'm like ready for bed no matter what. I'm always like straight to bed, straight to sleep. And like ours is so like this that our dog will look at us at about 9 o'clock and be like, and if it gets, we have to have the rare occasion where it gets a bit later, he'll just
Yeah.
sit up, look at us, and walk up the stairs himself. So like
Yeah.
our routine is so locked in like that that our dog knows, and he's like, "No, I'm off the bed now." He's like, "I'm done." And
Yeah.
something I use with clients, and I've used in my past, and again, it's coming back to like the meditation. And I remember when I did like some therapy to kind of get around like some anxiety things, and they told me to like write down things that are on your mind, and like I'm like that's a load of shit. But I tried it. So like when I'm like in the evening, if I've got a lot on my mind, like there's clients competing and I'm thinking, if I go to bed, I'm still going to be thinking that. But I always write it down. So that's the first thing to get to think about the next day. So I was like, I'm taking it out of my mind and putting it on the paper. So a lot of my clients who work like stressful jobs or are living in a high stress, some just every night just write down what's causing you stress, put it on the paper, get it out of your brain. You know it's there. Then the next day.
Yeah, there's like planning apps too, like Notion. Like, oh my gosh, my life is starting to run off of Notion. And I was joking with, or calendars, block calendars and block schedules are massive for bodybuilders. I think building in your meal times into your calendar so that you know like when you're supposed to have your meals is pretty huge too. And I think it's so simple. Like they're controllable tasks, and this is my main hang up with this is that I understand if stuff hits the ceiling fan for avoiding these four-letter words. Like you're gonna have days where something happens that is out of your control. But 95% of the time, all of these variables are such controllable variables that you should be able to execute on. And coming from someone who's had an individual tell me that I expect too much of my athletes that is competing at the highest level, it's like I do not understand how you pull the most out of someone if you can't even execute the simple daily controllable tasks. And this is the most frustrating thing as a coach is like when it's so controllable that you should just know how to do this when you're competing, like looking for a pro card or you're wanting to be able to compete on the Olympia stage. Like these should be non-negotiables that have already been implemented. And if they haven't, we need to spend some time working on it. And I'll even like, I have like little goals sections in my sheets where I'll set goals for them around routine if routine is a problem, like documenting the fact that they executed on this routine. Like that's how important I think this is, because I think it sets the stage for a high level of execution in every other aspect of the client process, right? And I think this is a big one as we start to kind of pivot into you know pro card desire with novice level of execution. The training side I think is the next piece that kind of starts to wane if even this routine is not there, because you get hydration status won't be the same every day that you go into training. If you're like massively skewed on your meals, you're not going to have digestion be in the same spot that you're going to training. You're not going to be consistently taking training footage. So like this is kind of where I would want to push the conversation next is like on the training side, like what are the habits that you see people start to kind of lax on or aren't executing well on when it comes to having this pro card expectation, but aren't even doing the simple things right. Alex, start with you, kick it off.
Yeah, a lot of it, man, is like just fighting through that barrier of, oh, well, I wasn't motivated to go work out today. And then they take a rest day, and then the next day they're still not motivated. It's like, well, hold on now. Like I'm not asking you to be motivated. You have to go. Like it's just like we get, drink water and eat food. Like it's time to train. You're going to train. And so a lot of times it's just getting them on the gym floor. And I make this joke with some people. I'm like, I can't even do half the cool stuff I know to do with a training block because I can't even get them. Like I'm still trying to get them in the gym consistently.
Mm,
But then like once you're in there, like you said, training footage for me is huge. Because like 90% of people don't know how to lateral raise,
No.
including myself. When you pulled me aside and showed me how to lateral raise, I was like, oh, I've been doing that wrong. Um, but it's so, it's not only like, because we'll have some people who their effort is just 1,000 and they're going through, they're hitting nose torque and they're training intense and they know, like, they're the people like, I got training, I don't need help with that. But then you break down their mechanics and you're like, oh, this is a disaster. Um, and
That
so
session with Tyler is
yeah,
and for you guys that like, we have that session on YouTube if you guys want to go check it out, where we trained at Evogen and kind of broke some things down. But I mean, that was a classic example of, and Darren, I'll kick it to you in a second, but that was a classic example of like, this dude's got the effort piece figured out, but like the effort's not the only piece that we've got to figure out, you
yeah,
know?
that's something I explain to people, like, when I'm asking for footage. I'm like, look, I know you're going to want to like impress coach, but I promise you, I'm looking at that maybe for half a second. So, uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, that'd be the biggest thing, is just, getting them into the gym, and then their execution just over and over again is going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah. And Darren, I know I kind of want you to kind of comment here as well, because we had what would you call that week that we spent here going through everything? Like
Deep dive
training
training camp.
camp.
Uh,
A
oh,
10 that like breakdown.
bring back the
Like,
small moves. This whole sort of section is really, it just reminded me recently of, I got asked the question through my Instagram. Like, someone asked me, what's the difference between pros and amateurs? And like, they're expecting some big fancy answer. I think the biggest difference between pros and amateurs is pros do the simple things really well over and over again. And I
yeah,
remember a couple of years back, I remember talking about my routine, and if you want to be a pro and you want to make progress, you have to do this, this, and this, and this. And I was alluding to the fact, like, eating the same food every day, eating at the same time every day, going to bed at the same time, doing the same movements over and over again in the gym. I remember like a couple of social media fitness people called me out and like, you don't need to do that, make progress and all this. And sure enough, here we are a couple of years later, they're doing the exact same thing and preaching the exact same thing, because they've got to that point where you realize, to make those 1% differences that matter, you have to remove as much variables as possible. Variables equal, like differences and potential mistakes. The better you can get at doing things over and over again, the more progress you make. And that comes into training as well. I think the biggest barrier with training with people is, on board, a couple of weeks into a program, on board, are we going to change up the movements? I'm like, you do realize if you change up the movements, you're going through a 4 to 6 week period of where you're just relearning the movement and not making progress.
skill acquisition, baby. I'd put up a post about how we should treat bodybuilding as athletics, that so people got very, very upset about in the comments. But this is just like, it's so obvious. Like, there's a skill aspect to training that has to be developed. And like Darren, just like, you've had one of the best training blocks you've had, I think, in probably your career right
Yeah.
now. Like, some small skill based stuff that we fixed during that week that you were here. And it's like, you've been doing this for how long? 15 years, 10, 12, 15 years?
Yeah, 12, 13 years.
Yeah, 12, 13 years. So like, we're still working on skill. And Darren's an Olympian, and John still works on skill, and my pro athletes still work on the skill of training. And it boggles my mind that we do not focus on perfecting this thing in training that drives the hypertrophy adaptation. Like, sure, PDs help with recovering to continue to drive that adaptation at a faster level. Nutrition does. Sleep helps with recovery capacity. All these things contribute. But like, this is the core stimulus that drives adaptation. I don't understand like how perfecting it wouldn't be. And I think Darren sharing your challenges with push would be a great example of like how this is like so impactful sometimes if you just take the time to perfect it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're kind of in that, kind of brought up something that we need to go over, and that's like with, I'm sure you guys talk the same as with clients, is trying to get video footage.
Oh yeah, that's a little bit, but yeah.
Trying to stress to people that, I can give you your nutrition, we can correct all this stuff, we can do all that, but ultimately, there's so much progress to be made by just correcting movements. Like, and that comes with exactly what you're saying about me with push. A few little tweaks to push that you notice, and it's helped me progress loads. That's the same thing we can do for clients when we're getting training footage from them, and some of them don't realize that. They're like, "Oh, I didn't want to get my phone out. I didn't want to set up a tripod." And it's like, is that 3 minutes worth what could potentially be a difference to making you turn pro or not?
Yeah, and it's like I get people, and Alex, I know you've run into this too, embarrassed to take training footage. You guys had that before?
Yeah,
It's like, man, like this is like you have a device that can tell you and give you feedback of how you're executing something immediately. Like one of the greatest tools that you have to help your process, and you are embarrassed to use it.
I feel like
I
saying, if you're embarrassed to film in a gym, how are you going to get on stage in your pants?
I can guarantee you, when you are dead center on stage, you are not going to be embarrassed about the 6 months of training footage you took in the last 6 months.
I tell them, I'm like, hey, just give your phone to someone and say, hey, would you mind recording this for me for my coach? I was like, it's so much cooler than if you're like, hey, we record this set, bro, of you like benching, 315. Like, I promise you, they're gonna respect you for what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like such a small task that's so simple, and it's just like we keep coming back to this, but these are small tasks. Like these are small, controllable daily tasks that we can all execute on. And I think that's truly what separates high level professionals from. There's a genetic skill component for sure. Like I think that there is some genetic component contributing to the highest levels of bodybuilding, but for pulling the most out of your process and in developing your physique, like these are small daily tasks that are easily controllable. Now, I want to touch on one last one that I do think you can get a long ways without, but I think if you truly want to find like your highest level of physique development, communication is massive. And finding your ability to, as you both shake your heads, finding your ability to communicate with your coach clearly is the quickest way to create a coach client relationship that just elevates you to the next level. And I think that this is like massive with the check-in process. And I think it's like a two-way street. And so like Darren, just kind of starting with you, like how do you foster this in regards to like the check-in process? I know it's different client to client, but just some basics that you
I,
do.
I, I try to like express that at the beginning, when I initially have a call with the client is, try and get really into like just relax the environment a little bit, like how you doing, and all this, and then stress to them that, all of this is cool that you input every week, but what you tell me is more important. Like, don't be afraid to tell me anything. Stuff going on, just tell me. I'm here to do more than just write your nutrition and set your training. And
Yeah.
ultimately, I always stress that it's proofs in the pudding. Like the clients you have the best relationships with get the best results.
Hmm.
And the ones that you kind of will check in and they'll be like, all good this week, and then you look at the result and you're like, ask the question, are you sure everything's all right? I'm surprised to see your weight's gone up. And then they go, oh, I'm really stressed at work. My wife is this and this. And you're like, tell me this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like you touched on it. It just comes from like that relationship builds over time. And once you get comfortable with the athlete, once the athlete gets comfortable with you, I'm big. Like I'm super sarcastic, and like I like to make jokes and cut up. So a lot of that I could usually get through the barrier like pretty quick. Um,
Hmm.
but it just goes into to how they also like receive like and interpret what you're saying. So whether like sometimes you have to go that extra mile as a coach and like, hey, maybe they need a video of me, or maybe they need a voice note from me rather than just typing. And some people, the more analytic people, they want to see the sheet updated and they don't really care to hear your voice. But then you can tie it all together with like words, like ways you're saying things to them, and just and again that over time that takes just from the jump, like how you say hey to them. Like I got a young kid, he's 20, he just hit 200 pounds. Every time I talk to him I was like, what's up, big man? like every time, and he loves it. So it's little things like that that can go, a long way.
In classic Luke fashion of reaching for something from his desk for a podcast, I think that this book is one of the just simple. It is like 125 pages. It is 160 pages. One of the most simple reads that I think, as a simple prerequisite for coaching, like emotional intelligence is probably the biggest skill you can have. Like I think it's pretty, uh, it's an expendable trait. I think, in my opinion, and or a non-expendable trait. Like you have to have it, and it's such a simple read, and will start to push you in the direction of understanding people. And there's so many little things you can do with check-ins, or like using humor, or like I have some people who send me voice notes. Like they have like a 2.5 minute, 3 minute time thing that they send me every week, and that works well for them rather than writing. Like some people are verbal communicators rather than writing, and you can hear it in their voice. Like when things change, like Darren, you talked about like not being able to pull something from a client. It's like if they're verbal communicators, like you can just hear it from the moment they start the voice note, right? And so there's certainly different ways to foster the check-in. I think making sure as a coach, like you keep them concise and on point is huge. Like there's a reason I put a time limit typically on the voice notes. It's because like I want them to get to what they're telling me and not drift off into storytelling, right? So um, I think it's really important to foster that communication, and I think it's an aspect that the longer you work with someone, the better it typically gets. And I think that it delivers with better results year after year. Like you guys have worked with some of your clients for a long time. I've worked with a lot of my clients for a very long time. And like it's at the point like I see one or two words in a check-in and I know immediately like what's going on. And I think that that's a big aspect. I think it's why we delivered at such a high level this past year in 2024. I think we 19, 20, 21 pro cards, something like that. That communication piece is the core of how we run coaching. And it's like the entire check-in process is built around that. And I think when we look at people having that pro card expectation, but not delivering on things that keep them from actually getting there, that ability to communicate to coach and actually tell them what's going on is like the last piece to tie it all together. Because you don't pay us for when things are going well. Like I tell people this all the time. You pay me for the moment that stuff hits the ceiling fan and I've got to figure it out. And if you don't communicate well to me, I'm not going to be able to figure it out. Like that is just like the profession in general. Like if you don't track your data and consistently execute on the controllable variables and then communicate with me things that are happening on the week to week basis. This is why when we do check-ins, like I switch to 2 times per week updates because I'm trying to make sure that I pick up on these things quicker, like before they actually become a big problem. And I think that it's just so massive. I think it's.
I've said to a couple of clients that like they're checking, they should imagine they're playing charades. The better your description, the easier it is for me to come to the conclusion.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I've never thought about it that way. I'm gonna have to steal that one.
Yeah,
It's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so huge, and I'll even I'll even use my social media to try to help foster this. Like I do some mindset stuff on my Instagram. Like I think it drives people. Like Alex, you put one up the other day that was so good. It was like the effort piece behind coaching and like being able to push like athletes to that level. Like it's like that level of buy-in is only going to improve that communication. Like when you bend over backwards for people, and this would be like the last point for coaches of like, if you're wanting to help foster your athletes to a place that allows them to execute at the highest level, like just buy in from the very beginning. And I think that that's like our love for this sport and like this passion for this sport. And yeah, I'm calling bodybuilding a sport. So if you guys have a problem with this, you guys can just like let us know in the comments below. That your love for this and showing that to the athlete is like the last piece to get them to execute at the highest level they can on all these controllable variables. Like Alex, and I'll kind of keep this to you. Like I think this is something you're so good at, is like showing everyone that you work with how much it means to you.
Yeah, because it's funny, I was never like this amazing competitor or anything, but like I could get in shape and in the gym, like I was able to gain respect from my peers, from my effort, and just those little boxes that I would check because I wasn't the genetically blessed guy who was going to go pro very easily. So it was something that when I kind of will post like a throwback shot of me competing or something of me training or something like it reminds them like, oh, like coach still has it, or I'll go and meet some people before their show, and they're like, "God, you're big, or you're in shape. What are you getting ready for?" And I'm like, "Nothing. This is just me hanging out." Like, but my goal is I want to be able to take my shirt off and pose with you and show you like an ab and thigh, and I don't look stupid. So, you know, and once they kind of see that, or I'll go through some storytelling moments. They're like, "Oh, like it almost fires them up." And it's funny you mentioned that post. I had like four people message me like, "Hey, sorry, man. Look, I know I've been slacking," and it wasn't anything at them. Like I wasn't even thinking about them. It was just like, "Hey, man, this is my standard that I'm trying to set," and I told him, I said, like, "You can do this. Like I know you can." And the whole thing behind this is we have to, like Darren was saying, it's the little things each day, but
Mhm.
this is like the genetic outliers. We're gonna go pro anyway. Like we've all seen it. Like they don't. It doesn't really take much to get them in shape. It doesn't really take much to get them huge, but we have to look for those little things to give us that edge where we can beat those genetically blessed people. And that's where to tie all this back together. When athletes can see that buy-in, it's just it gives them a amount of respect for us that they just double down on effort.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, I think this is a really good episode. Is there anything y'all want to leave the audience with before we kind of log off here? Nothing. Cricket.
And yeah, like I would say, we're in this sport that I heard this on podcast the other day, but we're in a sport where you can decide you want to be a pro at 20 years old, 25 years old, and you can achieve it, right? But
Mm.
like most sports, like you can't come to us and be like, "Hey, I want to go to the NBA or I want to go to the UFC at 30." Like you can't do that. And so while people think, oh, bodybuilding does take a long time, and yes, it does take a long time for most of us, it still is attainable to a certain degree. But like if you look at the Olympic level wrestlers, they've been wrestling since they were 2 years old.
Yeah.
And that's why they're there. So take advantage of the fact that, hey, this sport, if you decide later in life you want to get into it, it can be achieved. You just have to really execute on a whole different level to make it.
Yeah, I think that standard of
I think it is a sport that you though it doesn't matter where like basketball, football, all these things make it. You really do have to be a genetic elite, right?
Mhm.
yeah.
I mean,
Mm.
okay, but in bodybuilding, yes, to be like the Phil Heath or whatever, and be seven-time Mr. Olympia, yeah, you're going to be the genetic elite. But I think this is a sport where the misfits and the non-genetic elite, the people who couldn't maybe run like 10 steps in school without falling over, can make it with a certain amount of effort. If you're willing to fully commit to it and go for it, you can make it to a decent and high level pro in the sport. We've seen lots of people do it who maybe didn't
Yeah,
look like much in their early years. They knuckled down, did it, and they've made quite a career from
yeah, and I think it's a time piece. Like, how much time can you devote and give to the sport and execute at that high level for a long period of time? And I think that's the expectation of, like, if you're truly pursuing your best physique or competing at the highest level you're capable of, like, devoting yourself to whatever that timepiece looks like is the last component of, like, having that pro card expectation. And it's not, and I'll use this saying for people, like, fear is what if and faith is even if. Like, if you operate on this like, what if I make it, or am I going to make it, or what if I don't make it type of a place, like you're probably not going to actually make it, right? But it's, if you have this faith that I know that I execute the process to my highest level and my highest capability, even if I don't turn pro this year, I'm just going to go back and look at what I did, improve those aspects, execute my process, and get better the following year. And those are the people that end up making it. And then that's like such a big thing to kind of grasp. And it takes stress off the process as well, because it allows them to kind of focus on these daily things that we're talking about. But guys, this was a killer episode. I think it's just an expectation setting piece for people that is huge. And for you guys listening, like if you guys want us to talk about anything specific, like let us know in the comments below. If there's other habits you guys see of people that tell you they want that pro card, and they don't really kind of align with that thought process, like let us know in the comments as well. I'm super excited for this J3U coaching podcast kicking off. I think it's a great way for all of us to kind of share some of the anecdotal, what we're seeing in equals one type case study work. So yeah, until next time, take the off switch in the pursuit of results, and we'll see you on the next episode.